Hey guys, welcome back for another episode of Let Me Explain. So today's topic is focused on Guardians of the Galaxy and how I believe that it ruined the MCU. So obviously in light of the recent release of Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which you can check out my full spoiler and non-spoiler reviews for on the channel, I thought it was timely that I make this video, something that had been on my mind for a while, and I feel I have some really interesting points that I can convey to you that might help you convince you that this movie, as great as it was a turning point for the negative for the MCU. And so without further ado, let's get started. When Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 released in 2014, it was a runaway success both at the box office and with critics. It was carving out basically a new niche for Marvel as well, where they were able to explore these completely different characters unlike anything they'd had before, where that was more kind of comedy, humor based, and they were sort of goofy and they were set on the other side of the galaxy. It really opened up a whole new world for Marvel. It's kind of hard to remember now given how many MCU movies there have been since the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie almost 10 years ago. But this movie absolutely changed the rules and changed the game when it came to superheroes and the superhero genre. You had a director, James Gunn, who had a clear vision for this film and whose style perfectly suits this type of genre. You also had this new leading man, Chris Pratt, who was absolutely charismatic, and they surrounded him with a great supporting cast, great characters, and a great story to go with it. So everything was just firing on all cylinders when it came to this launch of the first Guardians movie. And so in the wake of Guardians of the Galaxy's success, every MCU movie after that wanted to adopt a lot of those traits. They wanted to fill their films with humor, make their characters more goofy, more lighthearted, kind of remove the serious stakes at play within their films, and kind of offset all these serious moments with a joke and whatnot. It was completely prevalent throughout a lot of the films following the Guardians of the Galaxy. And so it was clear that the MCU learned all the wrong lessons from Guardians of the Galaxy, because one of the things they forgot was that whilst that film had its humor and its goofiness, it also had a heart, but more so than that, those characters are designed to be that way. That same formula cannot be applied to every single superhero character from the comic books. It's just not the way it works. They are that particular style. It works for them. James Gunn is a director who works for those films. It cannot be applied the same way across the board. And I believe the biggest victim of the Guardians of the Galaxy formula was Thor Ragnarok, the third Thor movie. So obviously Taika Waititi was the director for that film, who does have kind of a similar style to James Gunn, where he likes to do kind of quirky stories, quirky characters. That's kind of his area. The problem there is that that is not Thor's character, and it had not been his character to this point. And so they completely changed the formula for Thor Ragnarok. And whilst that movie was a success, a lot of people loved it, and I have to admit I enjoyed it myself at the time, but it has not aged well on me, particularly since what's happened to Thor since then. And obviously it was kind of almost fool's gold at the time. We all bought into it. We liked that new kind of blokey attitude of Thor, where everything was kind of played for a joke. But ultimately where he has gone since then has been a disaster. You look no further than what they did to him in Endgame, turning everything into a fat joke. And then obviously the complete disaster that was Thor Love and Thunder. It was just a joke fest that was just basically a self-parody film. It was just an abomination. Even with the Tom Holland SpiderMan films, I felt that, yes, while Spider-Man is a character that does use his humor a lot of the time, it is completely synonymous with Peter Parker / Spider-Man. The problem was, though, the way it was used a lot of the time throughout his films was they would set up a serious scene and then they would just completely undercut that whole scene by throwing in a joke at the end of it. Whereas really it should be the other way around. You should have more of a kind of you can have a lighthearted moment or a joke, but then have a nice payoff at the end that gives it meaning. Because that way you get both the laugh and you get the emotion and the drama. But when you start a scene seriously but then turn it to a joke, it falls flat on both regards, because you no longer care about the seriousness of that moment, but then now you're just oh, well, that was lame. And if the joke doesn't land, it's even worse, because you're just thinking, oh, it's a lame joke. And so it is absolutely clear to me that they learned all the wrong lessons from Guardians of the Galaxy and how to use that going forward in the MCU. Because if you look back at the MCU prior to the release of the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, the only real source of humor in any of those movies was Tony Stark's Iron Man, played by Robert Downey Jr. And again, that is an in-character trait of his, that he uses his humor, his you know, his playboy personality to joke around, to make jokes of other people at their expense and whatnot. That's in character, and so that worked perfectly, and it was used sparingly as well throughout those films. And they used that humor in the right way, in the appropriate ways, where if it was a humorous moment, they kept it a humorous moment. But if it was a serious moment, they kept it serious. They didn't just try to undercut every serious scene with a joke. That's just not what they were doing. But it's clear that since Guardians of the Galaxy, they have been doing that all across the board with many of their films. Now there's all the likelihood that any character could act as dumb or goofy or as funny as any other character at any moment. There's no defining line between them. There's no more serious characters. There's no more like funny characters. There's nothing to divide them. They're all the same. At any one of them can be used for comedy value at any time, and there's no seriousness to any of them anymore. And so, as someone who loves my superhero movies, you know, who wants to invest myself in them, how am I supposed to take them seriously when the makers aren't even taking them seriously? You know, they're clearly just wanting to make one type of film where it's all the same formula as Guardians of the Galaxy. There's nothing new, and it's just everything's played off as a dumb joke and nothing is taken seriously. And I would even go as far as to say that even the second and third Guardians of the Galaxy movies suffered from the success of the first one, in that they also learned some of the wrong lessons from that movie, where they tried to focus too much on the humor and not enough on the serious plot at hand or the serious story at hand. Yes, I do believe those movies still have a heart, a lot more heart than most of the MCU movies, but that said, I still think they lean too much into the humor, more so than the first one, and to their own detriment. You only have to look as far as really Drax and Nebula's characters in particular to see how different they are now compared to the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Drax definitely had some goofy one-liners in the first one, but he honestly had a emotional story at the core of him, which was, you know, to do with the loss of his family. Whilst Nebula, on the other hand, was like pretty much a robot, but now she's just like this angry, emotional machine that just yells stuff all the time and is just a goofball like the rest of them. She's no different to the rest of the group, who are all goofballs already. I even remember seeing Thor Love and Thunder last year, and some of the reactions of people when they came out of the cinema was like, oh yeah, it was great, it was so funny, I loved it. I'm thinking, well, that's not what it's meant to be. Like, great, if you laughed and had a great time in that regard, that's fine, but that's not what it should be. A superhero movie should not be, oh, it's pure comedy and made you laugh the whole time. That's just a parody. And so that's exactly what I felt when I came out of it. I couldn't laugh at anything almost, because I'm just like, this is just the destruction of these great characters. And yeah, it was a shame, but I think Thor Love and Thunder was the absolute like culmination of what Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 started, where it just led down this path of goofiness and constant humor. And so whilst I say that, yes, I believe that Guardians of the Galaxy ruined the MCU, I don't think that it should be blamed. You know, it's a great movie and it does exactly what it's meant to be, what it's meant to do. And that's no fault of its own, but it's definitely the fault of the filmmakers who were making all the other movies who wanted to be like it. And that was the biggest problem here. So yeah, I really believe that ever since this first one in particular, we've just been on this slow downward decline where the movies have become more focused on humor rather than the serious storylines. Anyways, that's my thoughts on this topic. I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you believe that Guardians of the Galaxy was the turning point? Do you believe it was another movie that caused it? Whatever it is, I'd love to hear it. If you like the video, don't forget to like, subscribe to my channel if you enjoy my content, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.